storm over Los Angeles had not yet passed when news of Luna's death, or disappearance, as some whispered, spread across the city like an untamed fire. The younger generation of the Forrester and Spencer families were still drowning in the wreckage of that chaos, but at the Forrester estate, another storm was silently gathering. Behind closed doors, amid silk curtains and portraits of legacy, Eric Forrester sat in the dim light of his study, staring at the untouched glass of bourbon in his hand. The world had changed around him, faster than his heart could bear, and yet somehow it was all heartbreakingly familiar. Another scandal, another tragedy, another woman's tears staining the marble floors of his home. Poppy Nozawa had been visiting the Forrester mansion often since the accident. Officially, she came to discuss charity partnerships in Luna's name, a foundation for troubled youth, something to transform grief into redemption. Unofficially, she came because she had nowhere else to go. The silence of her apartment had become unbearable, haunted by memories of her daughter's laughter and the scent of lavender shampoo that still lingered in the bathroom. Luna's absence was a wound that refused to close. And Eric, kind-hearted, paternal, and infinitely flawed, opened his doors without hesitation. The first time Poppy arrived after the funeral, she stood in the foyer trembling, her hands clutching a folder she never opened. Eric crossed the room to greet her, his gait slower than before, but his voice as warm as ever. "You shouldn't be alone," he had said softly. Those words were harmless enough, gentle, almost fatherly, but they would become the first thread in a web neither of them could untangle. Over the next few weeks, their encounters became routine. Poppy would bring tea or fresh flowers from Luna's memorial garden. Eric would offer her a seat in his sunlit conservatory, where the scent of roses filled the air and the sound of the fountain masked their long silences. She found comfort in his steadiness, the way his voice carried the weight of decades without judgment. He found in her a reminder of something he thought he'd lost, the warmth of connection, the fragile beauty of empathy untainted by ambition. Donna watched these small moments from afar, at first without suspicion. She had always trusted Eric, perhaps more than she should have. After all, she had once been the interloper herself, the woman who stood at the edge of another marriage, waiting for the door to open. She had vowed never to become the wounded wife she once replaced. But something in the air began to shift. She noticed how Poppy lingered longer in the hallways, how Eric's tone softened whenever her name was mentioned, how the sound of their laughter carried faintly through the house late in the afternoon. At first, Donna told herself it was grief. Poppy had lost her daughter. Eric had lost his peace. Compassion, not temptation, bound them. Yet late at night, as she lay awake beside him, she felt the space between them widening, an invisible distance made of unspoken guilt and stolen tenderness. Meanwhile, the rest of the family felt the tremors of change even before they understood its cause. Ridge had been the first to notice his father's increasing absences, the uncharacteristic secrecy that hung around him like fog. Brooke, always sharper than she appeared, voiced what others only feared. "If Eric gets caught in another scandal," she said one evening over wine, "Forrester Creations won't survive it." Not after Luna. Ridge wanted to believe it was an exaggeration. His father was the moral compass of their empire, the face of their brand. But the truth was that the company had already been walking on a knife's edge since Luna's death. Public trust was fragile, investors wary, and whispers of workplace toxicity still lingered online. The last thing they needed was a rumor that the patriarch of the Forrester dynasty was comforting the mother of a disgraced and possibly murdered woman. Yet, in the quiet corners of his mansion, Eric's heart refused to obey logic. Poppy's presence filled a space he hadn't realized was empty. She was unlike Donna, whose love was golden, easy, familiar. Poppy's sadness carried a dangerous beauty, a gravity that drew him closer. She spoke little, but when she did, her words seemed to hum with pain and resilience. Her eyes, dark and glassy, reflected both desperation and longing. And Eric, ever the rescuer, mistook that longing for need. One evening, she brought him a box of Luna's sketches, charcoal portraits of the ocean, abstract lines that hinted at the turmoil inside her daughter's mind. As they looked through them together, Poppy's composure broke. "She was just a girl," she whispered, her voice trembling. "A girl who wanted to be loved. I failed her, Eric. I failed her in every way." He reached for her hand without thinking, his thumb brushing over her wrist. "You didn't fail her," he said. "The world did." Something shifted in that moment. The air thickened with something unspeakable, dangerous. Poppy looked at him, her tears glistening in the lamplight, and for the briefest second, the grief between them turned into something else, something electric, forbidden, and alive. Donna walked into the room just as Poppy pulled her hand away. It was an innocent gesture, easily explained, but Donna's intuition screamed otherwise. She smiled politely, exchanged pleasantries, but inside, a familiar dread took root, the dread of a woman who knows she is losing her place in someone's heart. Later that night, she confronted Eric in their bedroom. "You're too close to her," she said quietly. "People are talking." "She's grieving, Donna," he replied, frustration lacing his tone. "Her daughter just died. Do you expect me to turn her away?" "No," she said. "I expect you to remember who you are. Who we are." But Eric's silence told her everything she needed to know. As the weeks passed, Poppy's visits became more frequent. Donna's presence became less visible. The staff whispered, the tabloids speculated, and somewhere in between, the truth twisted itself into scandal. Photos surfaced of Eric and Poppy leaving a restaurant late at night, grainy, innocent, but enough to ignite rumors. Headlines screamed Forrester patriarch comforts grieving mother, more than a friendship? Ridge exploded when he saw it. "Do you realize what this looks like?" he demanded during a tense family meeting. "The world thinks you're having an affair with Luna's mother. We're already fighting to protect the brand after everything that happened. You're giving them ammunition." Eric tried to reason with them. "It's not what it looks like. She needs someone. I'm helping her." Brooke's voice cut in, cold and precise. "That's what you said about Donna once." The words struck deep, but Eric didn't respond. Because deep down, he knew Brooke was right. What had begun as compassion had crossed a line, even if he refused to name it. He couldn't stay away from Poppy. Her sorrow was addictive, her vulnerability, a mirror of his own mortality. She made him feel needed again, alive in a way that frightened him. For Poppy, the line between gratitude and seduction blurred with every passing day. She didn't plan it, not at first. But grief had a way of distorting boundaries. The more she relied on Eric, the more she began to see him as her anchor, her savior. And when the world turned its back on her, when whispers of Luna's crimes made her an outcast, Eric's acceptance became her only refuge. Yet somewhere in her heart, she knew what she was doing. She knew that every tear shed in his arms chipped away at the stability of his marriage, at the reputation of his family, at the dignity he had spent a lifetime protecting. But pain demanded company, and if she couldn't have her daughter back, she would not lose the one man who still made her feel seen. Donna, meanwhile, began to unravel. Her confidence, once radiant and effortless, eroded under the weight of suspicion. She replayed every conversation, every glance, every late-night text Eric had dismissed as business. She began to see ghosts in every reflection, betrayal in every pause. When she confronted Poppy directly one afternoon, her composure cracked. "You think I don't see what you're doing?" Donna's voice was steady, but her hands trembled. Poppy met her gaze with disarming calm. "I'm not doing anything, Donna. I lost my daughter. Forgive me if I can't stop crying long enough to reassure you." The cruelty of the truth lay in its subtlety. Poppy didn't need to lie outright. Her grief was her alibi, her shield. Any accusation made Donna look heartless, jealous, petty. And so, slowly, Donna began to lose. Not to another woman's beauty or youth, but to her tragedy. Ridge and Brooke tried to intervene, urging Eric to distance himself, to protect the family name. But he refused. "You don't understand," he told Ridge. "Poppy's not some scandal waiting to happen. She's a human being who's lost everything. I won't abandon her. Even if it costs you everything you've built? Ridge asked. Eric didn't answer. Because deep down, he knew that love and morality had never coexisted easily in his world. He had made a career out of designing perfection, dresses, homes, families, and watching them unravel. The breaking point came at a charity gala held in Luna's honor. It was meant to signal unity, a gesture of compassion from the Forrester family to the grieving mother. But the cameras caught more than anyone expected. In a moment of vulnerability, as Poppy faltered on stage, Eric rose from his seat, took her trembling hand, and whispered something that made her smile through her tears. The image of them, his hand over hers, their eyes locked, appeared on every screen by morning. The public reaction was instantaneous and merciless. Forrester patriarch's scandalous sympathy. Has Eric crossed the line? Investors panicked, shares dipped, and social media erupted with judgment. The brand that had once stood for glamour and grace was now drowning in moral outrage. Behind closed doors, the family fractured. Brooke accused Eric of selfishness, Ridge accused him of blindness, and Donna accused him of betrayal. But Eric said nothing. He sat in silence as they argued around him, his gaze fixed on the window, on the storm clouds gathering once more over Los Angeles. That night, Poppy arrived at the mansion again, this time in tears. I didn't mean for any of this to happen, she said, her voice breaking. I just wanted Luna's name to be remembered for something good. Eric looked at her, his heart aching with the weight of their mistakes. You've become part of my life, Poppy, he said quietly. But I don't know if that's saving either of us. She stepped closer, her hand trembling as it touched his chest. Maybe we're beyond saving, she whispered. In another life, those words might have been romantic. Here, they were prophecy. The next morning, Donna packed her things. She left no scene, no ultimatum, only silence. When Eric found her note, it was written with devastating simplicity. You taught me to believe in forgiveness. But even forgiveness has its limits. The scandal that followed tore through the Forrester legacy like wildfire. Forrester Creations' image faltered under public scrutiny, and every magazine cover carried some version of the same question. Is this the end of the Forrester dynasty? Poppy, branded the villain by tabloids, vanished from public view. Some said she fled to care for distant relatives. Others whispered that Eric was supporting her in secret, that their connection hadn't ended but gone underground, hidden, forbidden, immortalized in shame. Eric returned to his designs, his hands steady, but his heart hollow. Each sketch seemed to bleed regret. For the first time in his life, he saw beauty not as perfection, but as consequence, a fragile illusion that always demanded a price. Donna, meanwhile, rebuilt herself quietly, away from the headlines. When reporters asked about Eric, she simply smiled and said, "Some loves aren't meant to last forever, but they leave marks that never fade." And somewhere, in the fading light of the Forrester estate, Eric stood before the mirror, his reflection fractured by age and remorse. He had been a husband, a lover, a father, a creator, and now, perhaps, a cautionary tale. The world outside saw scandal, but inside his heart, he saw something simpler. Two lost souls clinging to each other in the dark, mistaking grief for love. That was the true scandal, the one no camera could capture. And as the rain began to fall again, washing over the city that never